Good evening, European history folks. This is the first video for Unit 3. I have my study guide here on my laptop to the left, so if I look like this, I am not checking the runner at first. I am just making sure that I am on target and keeping us going down the road. So let's get going. A lot to cover. We begin with Louis XIV of France. Louis, who becomes this iconic figure of absolutism, and really the age is named after him, the age of Louis XIV. That's pretty self-explanatory there. From 1643 to 1715, an amazing 72 years, Louis ruled France and attempted to expand the borders of France while at the same time becoming the image of absolute power that other monarchs around Europe often tried to emulate. Not only in a fashion sense, but in a build a huge palace sense, in a have a monstrous army sense, in a limit your nobles sense, you name the sense. He had it, except for money sense. Louis had no money sense. He was broke. He had the money sense of MC Hammer, clashed right up against Mike Tyson. No money sense there at all. All right, so going for it. Louis's policy with the nobles. The nobles are the biggest threat to Louis's power in France, and trying to find a way to limit them is the best policy. Louis's predecessor, Louis XIII, and Henry IV had dealt with problems with the nobles as well. Louis's answer is to try and entertain them. He brings the nobles together at his fabulous palace at Versailles, and he distracts them with the most mundane, foolish jobs anyone has ever had to do as a way of weakening their power. And at the same time, he's got his agents down in the local provinces and towns taking care of the business that the nobles used to do. It's a great way, especially over the course of 72 years, it's a great way to make sure that people forget that the nobles deserve any power, and they begin to see that only you should have that power. Colbert and the economy, right? This is the big problem for Louis, is that all of this extravagant living, this la vida loca, this lifestyle, it's not cheap. And there's no way that a country where you can't tax the nobles is going to be able to generate a lot of ready income without some major innovative ideas. And the man charged with those innovative ideas is Jean-Baptiste Colbert. Okay, Colbert is Louis XIV's finance minister, and he is really charged with, you know, the toughest job in the history of mankind. This is a kid in a candy store, if we're talking about Louis in a legitimate sense, who has no one in the world who can say no to him. And it's Colbert's job to try and pay the bill at the end of the day when Louis can have anything that he wants, any amount that he wants, and no one can ever stop him. Colbert does his best. At the end of the day, he probably resorts to taxing people more often than he would like, but he enters into mercantilist politics. He tries his best to build up France's colonies. They build a lot of their own homegrown domestic industries to challenge other European countries. They do everything that they can do. At the end of the day, there's nothing that you could have done to stop the debt, and Louis is going to leave behind a massive, massive debt. Another of the legacies is the ending of the policy of religious tolerance. Under Louis XIII, and even before him, under Henry IV, there had been some measure of tolerance for the 7% or so population of Huguenots, or French Calvinists who lived within France. Under Henry IV, that was an outright tolerance. Under Louis XIII, they lost some of their privileges, and under Louis XIV and the Edict of Fontainebleau in 1685, their tolerance went away altogether. If you're an absolutist monarch, this makes perfect sense. Absolutism means I have total control of the country. If you're sitting in your town practicing a different religion, then I don't have total control of the country, and I need to limit your right to do that. Now, unfortunately, this is not the best economic move. It takes about 200,000 very talented, very well-off people and chases them out of the country, but Louis would say that it builds up his power. Now, that power is put to the test most on the battlefield. Of his 72 years, Louis is at war 57 of them. The French army, which bloats to 400,000 men, 400,000 dudes. Imagine the food bill. I get 400,000 cheeseburgers. That's a lot. Every meal, the bill is going to be a lot. Okay, it's very expensive to feed, to clothe, to house that many people. But if you want to be feared, as Louis wants to be feared, and if you want to expand France's borders to their natural boundaries as he thought they should, you need a big army. Now, the biggest war we talked about was the War of the Spanish Succession, a war in which Louis, through some disputed succession plans for the Spanish king, attempted to place his grandson onto the throne of Spain. Now, the other European powers were not simply going to allow Louis to casually float his grandson onto the throne of France and the throne of Spain simultaneously, thus creating a massive Bourbon dynasty in Western Europe. The balance of power would have been severely threatened, and that threat to the balance of power is the reason we see the gathering of a coalition of the Prussians, the Austrians, the English, the Netherlands, the Portuguese, really anyone who isn't France or Spain, in order to draw the line. The ensuing Peace of Utrecht, which ends the War of the Spanish Succession, declares that Louis's grandson can have the throne, but one man cannot rule simultaneously over both Spain and France, so although that young man sitting on the throne is a Bourbon, he is not the same one or sitting on the Spanish throne, I should say, as a Bourbon. He's not the same one who is sitting on the throne of France. The British are the big winners here, picking up the opportunity to seize some colonial lands and also the slave trade as part of their victories during the war. We're going to switch our focus. That sounded weird. We're going to switch our focus over to the eastern part of Europe as I scroll down my study guide here to talk about these Eastern European countries. As I said in class, Eastern Europe is a different deal. Generally speaking, they live in an area where cultural trends have not had the dominance. You don't see as much of the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment. There's some Reformation there, but maybe not the Renaissance either, okay? Especially when we start heading towards Russia. We begin with the Hohenzollerns of Prussia, who grew out of the struggle and the chaos of the 30 Years' War, promising local German powers protection from the chaos of the war. The Hohenzollerns were able to scramble themselves into an absolutist power situation where nobles, in return for granting the Hohenzollerns, absolute power, were given the freedom from taxation, control over their serfs, and the best positions in the army. This is a very different way of treating your nobles than we saw in France. The rulers of Prussia are going to harness their nobles. They're going to put them to work. We're going to see this in Russia as well. The leaders of France, on the other hand, use their nobles as playthings. That's a very different way of going about business. In Austria, the Habsburgs struggled to find any kind of absolutism whatsoever. Yes, they were in charge, but they were in charge of a polyglot, a territory that included a lot of different cultural and linguistic and religious minorities. Any attempt at uniformity, any attempt at trying to suppress people who were of a different background would have led to a major outbreak of trouble. And so the Habsburgs are hands-off, generally speaking. The Russians, the Romanovs, under Peter the Great, the Russians come into this great golden moment. Peter has this design, this idea that's going to make Russia more Western. This Westernization program looks a lot like what you'd expect out of Louis XIV. Bigger army, build a palace, in this case build an entire city, tax the daylights out of your citizens to pay for it, try and get as many educated individuals around you in order to make sure that you're controlling the society, and they flock to you as a central point, much as Louis was the Sun King of the West. Peter the Great saw himself as being the great cultural leader of the East. He writes to a lot of enlightened figures. He thinks of himself as being kind of a cheeky fellow. Now, there are limits, and it is Russia. So as much as he's going to try and reform the country, keep in mind that any attempt at bringing this entire country under one man's absolute control is going to be very difficult. Geography provides that. Yes, he builds these different regions and states and puts them in the hands of some of his most trusted individuals. He does a lot to try and reform the society, to try and build a little bit of mercantilism. But again, it's Russia. We are so far north that we're not going to be able to grow anything that the rest of the world really wants unless they're interested in large cubes of ice, which they might need. You never know when you want to sled down a hill. That's fun. Probably not all the time, though. No. And I can't get down the study guide fast enough. I think on the second page it talks about Poland. It does. The last topic we'll talk about are the Polish, who are an example of why we shouldn't praise people who fight absolutism too much. right? We take this opinion that absolutism is a general negative because we live in a society where we don't have absolutism. We don't like people who seize too much power. We scorn them. Ooh, Mr. President, you're doing too much with the powers of the society. Shame on you. Ooh, the Supreme Court trying to make everything the way they want it to be. Ooh, we don't like it. We like a more Jeffersonian vision, right, where the power is more spread out in that sense. But there's something to be said for absolutism. Nobody ever marched into France and tore the thing to pieces and kept the pieces. No one ever marched into Russia and kept the entire thing. Poland, on the other hand, got flat jacked by its neighbors. Over the course of the 18th century, due to the fact that the Polish had a very, very, very weak absolutist monarch, Poland essentially disappeared from the map. During 3 separate partitions, the Prussians, the Austrians, and the Russians did not even go to war to dismember Poland. They simply came to agreements over who should get what, and they ripped the country into pieces. And there wasn't an absolutist leader to put together an army in order to stop it. The nobles who were nobles in Poland were happy to be nobles somewhere else as long as they kept the power of nobles that they had beforehand. And that's how Poland disappeared from the map by 1795. Now, they'll be back, but what we should remember is that absolutism isn't always a negative thing. Have a good night.